think one of the reminders of the CentreCourt MBA Festival is that there is no one path to business school, and that diversity is so key to the MBA experience that people enjoy. But of course, schools are looking for high flyers, and my next guest was really a high flyer. And at the age of 20, he already had his pilot's license, grew up in a small town on the west coast of Canada, decided that the family construction business wasn't the future for him, and went off to UBC to get his undergrad studying business. It's my pleasure to welcome Sean McNulty, who is a graduate of the National University Singapore Business School, class of 2017. Sean, thanks very much for being with us.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Now, you had started off, I guess, as I mentioned, the family business, but then fell into FX trading in Toronto. But you'd already had a taste of international travel by heading to Singapore, I think, during your undergraduate studies. You've now built a great career. You're an FX options trader at JP Morgan, 3 years out of NUS. What was the big appeal of Southeast Asia?
I mean, for myself, after doing the exchange in undergrad, and then it kind of solidified for me, the NUS is where I wanted to do my MBA and my master's. And I think for me, I think of the sort of balance between lifestyle, career opportunities, and then you kind of think of it as like a Venn diagram where the two overlap. And so for my lifestyle, I really like warm weather. It sounds like maybe a little bit shallow perhaps, but I really didn't like cold. Growing up in Canada, it's just freezing out. So when I first moved abroad, in the first place I lived being Singapore, I just thought summer, sunshine every day, t-shirt, shorts every day, was just phenomenal for me. So I mean that really appealed. And then Singapore has a nice mix where it's a garden city. There's lots of greenery. There's lots of parks, but there's also a very very exciting, dynamic financial center, especially when it comes to commodities and FX. And so it kind of is just a nice sort of overlap of all those things, and it's unique in that sense. If you think about financial market capitals of the world being Singapore, Hong Kong, London, and New York, I suppose, and maybe you could throw Dubai in there if you wanted. If you look at warm places that sort of have a nice mix of greenery and things, it's Singapore is kind of the best spot for all that. So for me, it was just the kind of things that I like to do between the outdoors, warm weather, and then also having the opportunities career-wise. Singapore was just a perfect fit, and then NUS was the perfect school to kind of, one, going to the local university really helps in terms of your local network things, and two, it's just opens just a ton of doors here because everybody knows, it's a top university here, so everybody knows it. Every the amount of interviews I got really helped me, eventually land the position that I'm in now, like you mentioned, at JP Morgan, and it's been super fun 3 years. Still really enjoy coming into work every day, and so I think I was fortunate. It worked out really well for me.
Right. So great climate, one of the safest cities on the planet, this dynamic financial center, but also home to so many of the Fortune 500 companies, their Asian headquarters based out of Singapore. So very dynamic economy. And in the last 10, 15 years, it's become a powerhouse for business education with NUS and various other players that have located there. I mean, NUS is now in the top 15 in the FT's global MBA ranking, with incredible career placement records, 90% international students. What was the appeal of NUS, and how has it served you with your new role at JP Morgan?
Yeah, so I think one of the appeals is, like you mentioned, was the international. It's such an international program. It's very, I think Singapore by nature, just given that it is a small city state, arguably one of the last few in the world, it's very outward looking in nature, just given that it has to be, just out of, I guess, necessity. And so that's reflected right into the NUS program and the courses you take. And I like that, the fact that it was looking at kind of the world at large. And a lot of my classmates, they work all over Southeast Asia, all over Europe, all over the Americas and things. And it's quite I think remarkable in that sense, because there are other programs like it depends on where you're from, but some countries are much more domestically focused, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's just a question of what you find more interesting. If you kind of are more interested in the world at large, Singapore is a nice place because it's focused that way. And I think the other part of Singapore, and this could be a good or a bad thing depending on how you look at it, is it's academically very rigorous. So one thing that I learned when I did my undergrad exchange is I went from being like a very good student in Canada, like, putting a bit of extra effort in, but not like a crazy amount, to being like one of the worst students in Singapore. It was such a shocker, like when I came here and I was just in the bottom sort of 10% of scores and everything bell curved. But at the same time, I learned a tremendous amount in the one semester of my undergrad. And I thought, so for a master's program, if I could have like the academic rigor is I think almost sometimes a little too much, but I mean the thing is you at the end of it you come out, you learn like a tremendous amount. And so for me that was also important to do. If I was going to do the additional master's program, I wanted to make sure I was someplace where I had like the networking and the opportunities internationally, but also that I knew I was going to learn something. And I knew just from my undergrad experience that that academically it was going to be very rigorous, and I was going to come out of those 2 years with a lot of knowledge. So I think it served me well in that sense.
When you add that academic rigor to the sort of international perspective, you had exchanges, you spent weeks in Myanmar, in Tel Aviv, in Seoul, in South Korea. You also had exchange programs with NYU Stern and the London Business School. So I mean, you have an extraordinary background. How does that fit into the program, and how NUS then tries to build individuals that have a truly global mindset?
Yeah, I guess it's very encouraged, to be honest. Like it sounds, it's funny when you list it off like that. It sounds like I was like exceptional to that extent, but most of my classmates had similar sort of exchanges. Like I guess there's two different categories, where there's the short exchanges and then the extended exchanges, which is like a full semester. So the like Seoul, Tel Aviv University were both sort of the short exchanges. Then Myanmar was what they call study trips. And then I did the full semester exchanges at LBS and NYU. So I enjoyed the MBA so much that I actually extended my MBA from 17 months to an additional semester, just so I could do 2 full semester exchanges, which I think, given the fact that I was going to have, like, you work for the rest of your life, right? Like I'm going to be working to 60, probably longer than that, given the trend of things. So I figured that another semester, and actually it's funny because some people seem like they get into an MBA program and they're in such a rush to finish it. They like 1 year, 17 months. Where to me, it's like I think in the grand scheme of things, it's a very short period of your life, and so try to, like, maybe if 17 months is up for you, fine. But in my mind, extending it was one of the better decisions I made, because it did allow me to get that little bit of international exposure you're speaking of.
We talked about the dynamism of the Southeast Asian economy and the placement rate. I think 95% of NUS grads had found a position within 3 months, according to the FT ranking. Clearly, it helped to open doors with you for JP Morgan. So how does the school, given how heavily networked it is in the region, how does it then open those doors and support your next career steps?
Yeah, so I think, like, the number one thing is that at every firm here in Singapore, there is a number of NUS alumni. Like, I work with a number at JP Morgan now. It's just that the school's done such a good job building a program in, I guess, a relatively short period of time. And there's just NUS graduates everywhere, whether it's from from the business school or the art school or anywhere. So I feel like when you submit your resume with the NUS on it, like, it automatically, like, it's very highly likely you'll get a call back, which is obviously huge. And then once you get the call back, the career center's there, where you can go and say, hey, like, this is the firm I'm applying for. This is like what I'll be interviewing for. Is there anyone I could reach out to? And then they're very, I guess, active in kind of sourcing alumni and things to kind of help you navigate or have people to reach out to ahead of the interview process, or even just to reach out to within the company to maybe give you a referral or something along those lines. And then, I mean, ultimately, you do have to interview. You have to, get the position yourself. Like, they can't do that part for you. But I think the door opening aspect of the program is really second to none, I think, in Singapore. Like, it's I mean, to put in perspective, I did have 3 internship offers. And so I ended up choosing JP Morgan because it was specifically because it was based in Singapore and what I wanted to do, where the other ones I could potentially be in Hong Kong or someplace else. So I really wanted to stay in Singapore. Was very important to me. And then I was fortunate in the sense that I was able to secure my job after the internship. So the whole last year of the MBA, I'd already had my job, which allowed me to like really relax, for the last bit, which is nice. So, so the support's there, and then but I think it's also important to remember that you've got to ultimately get the position yourself. But the callback rate, I was really impressed with, because you expect a lot of rejections in any job search, and it was less than I was expecting. And it's nice at the end to have a few different things to choose from, so you can kind of pick what suits you best.
Right. The idea of doing an MBA in your late 20s, early 30s, for many, it is this opportunity to then that leap of faith and head out of your home country where you've grown up. You'd already traveled by that point, but just, I guess, with such an international audience at CentreCourt, what do you think that the international MBA experience brings at that stage, in your late 20s, early 30s? Because it's a big move, it's a big investment, but a great way to gain that international exposure.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I've often wondered what it would be like to go back to Canada with the Singapore MBA. I never got to that point, but I think 2 things on that point is that the international exposure never hurts, right? Because it just gives you something different. Where so for instance, if I were to go back to Canada, I mean, how many national universities of Singapore masters people it would just be such a thing where at the very least people would be like, oh, that's kind of odd. Let's talk to that person and see why they were over there. And the fact is, there's things you just learn from living in a country culturally different from your own. It's just there's things that you just take for granted that you can only really pick up, I think, by living someplace else. It's almost like a language or something. You just pick up these sort of things that you can read about them all you want, but until you live it, it's very difficult to sort of comprehend. And then the other thing too is I do think timing matters. I was kind of at the point where so I started the MBA when I was late 30s, late 30, as in the year 30, not late 30s, but yeah, 29, 30. And I felt like if I didn't do it then, there is a point where if you get too late, there was some classmates I had who were in their late 30s, 37, 38, but it's just difficult as you're getting back. I think you can do it, but it's a little challenging. So I think if you put off your MBA, I think there's that kind of sweet spot where it's 29 to maybe 33ish, where it becomes fairly easy to roll that into either a career switch or a geographic switch. And I think later it can be a little bit more challenging. So I think there is that window just to be cognizant of, because I know that there's that the fact is we only live 80, 90 years as humans. We work for a certain percentage of a certain chunk of those years. And so it would be nice if you lived till you're 160, you could take a full run in a couple different careers, right? If you really think about it, why do we just get one specialization? And the reason why is because it takes a really long time to get really good at something. And I think if you're looking to do the international MBA, just keep that in mind. And then like you say, I think it's a huge plus no matter what. So you should definitely do it, but don't keep putting it off until the point where maybe it becomes a bit more of a challenge to do what you want to do with your careers.
Yeah, well, if we're still doing CentreCourt in 80 or 90 years, obviously I'll be back in touch to see how those plans have gone. One final question, as one of the world's top 15 business schools, a very selective program at NUS. So advice for the next generation of applicants to the school.
I mean, yeah. So, I think, thinking back to my interview, I think it's going to sound so cheesy, but it's just being genuine, right? In terms of why you want to be in. So, I guess they're pretty adamant about asking about, why you want to be in the program, what your long-term goals are, and I feel just coming across genuinely in terms of why you're doing it. They'll challenge on some points. Like I said, I wanted to move to Singapore, and they said, well, what if you enter the program and there's no job offers in Singapore? How will you feel then? And I was like, well, that's fine, but I can always like get a job somewhere else and transfer back into Singapore. You know, it's not like the end of the road and I can never work in Singapore again. So like, I guess maybe that was a test to see how adamant I was about like relocating to Singapore, because that's obviously probably your highest probability is getting a job. Like, it's always easier to get a job sort of where you're studying, I suppose, compared to overseas, like depending on what your goals are. But yeah, I think it's just, you know, like you want to make sure you really think about it, and then like just if you give genuine, honest answers. I don't think there's a lot of gaming of the whole application process, really. Like I don't think they're overly focused on academics. Like I wasn't sort of quizzed on, you know, I wasn't given any math questions during an interview or anything like that. You know, they have, I think like every MBA program, they have the bar that they kind of set to make sure there's a certain sort of academic standard, which, you know, I don't think always necessarily like there's a big difference between, you know, getting good marks on tests and going and accomplishing things in the world. But you know, they have to draw a line somewhere. So they have this academic standard. But once you're past that, I found it was very sort of like qualitative. Why do you want to be in the program? And I think, I mean, I guess I never really asked them about it, but the sense I got from my classmates is they really try to kind of pick people who will kind of be an interesting sort of fit and from very like different parts of, I guess, the business sector. So like, one girl I studied with, her undergrad was in genetics. Another friend of mine, like good friend of mine still, he actually ended up working in Panama, but he's a lawyer by training. There was a couple doctors, like, so it was kind of interesting because you could see that they were really trying to, like, they were kind of looking at the forest as well as the trees, if that makes any sense. So they're kind of like, I think by kind of making your genuine personality come through, that can help them see how you might be able to fit in the program. Where I think if you came through as like maybe robotic and pre-programmed to trying to say what you think they wanted to hear, you're going to have a hard time connecting on that sort of qualitative level. And I think that may like work against you in terms of when they're looking at like how the whole group's going to interact. So, I mean, it sounds, again, it's such a cliche, but it's really just like, you know, it just tells them your honest reasons why you want to be there. And I think if you've done the work to do the GMAT, and you've obviously like studied and gotten to the point where you're at the point of applying, you probably got a pretty good answer was inside you, that you just have to maybe put into like a concise sort of marketable sound blurb. But the key is just to make sure it's genuine.
Right. Well, we managed to get through this interview without asking you any math questions too.
Yes.
So
I appreciate it very much.
Thank you for taking the time. I know it's evening in Singapore. Really appreciate you adding your voice and that perspective on study at one of the top schools in Asia. It's great to have that contribution, and we really appreciate having you with us, Sean.
Cool. It was a pleasure being here, and I can't speak highly enough of the NUS MBA program and my time in it. It was you know, one of the highlights of my life. It was great.
That's a nice note to end on. Okay, take care. Stay well.